Hello, my name's Kate, and I like to explain things. About 6 months ago, I had a conversation with somebody named Billy about why do Christians hate trans people? Because we're both Christian, and, well, I won't ruin it for you yet, quite yet. Um, a month ago, when I finally got around to editing the conversation, I realized I had about an hour worth of content, and YouTube being YouTube, that meant I had to split the conversation into two videos. So, if perchance you are annoyed by the first answers to our question, real, stick around. There will be more. Okay. Transition.
I'm a Christian. And I don't hate trans people. Billy, are you a Christian?
I am also a Christian, and I are a trans people, and I try very hard not to hate myself or my people.
What? Yeah.
Right?
So very clearly, a lot of Christians, I would say, don't hate trans people. And in fact, plenty of Christians love trans people. Because in my experience, trans people are very lovable.
We're cuddly too.
Sweet, caring, kind. I mean, yeah, I'm friends with my friends, it turns out, and sometimes my friends are trans. I would say that one of the reasons I want to reduce prejudice, and transphobia is a prejudice, and a very pressing one, is because I'm a Christian.
Right.
How does your faith inform your perspective on this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, so, I mean, I get baseline, right? I agree with you. Like Christians, well, in fact, my Christianity drives me to resist oppression, to resist prejudice, right? Like I was about to say I come from a liberationist tradition, but I don't. I come from an evangelical tradition, and I have come out of that evangelical tradition, and I now operate in a liberationist, sort of out of a liberationist paradigm in my Christian walk, which is to say, well, I mean, I guess that means a lot of things, but specific to this, it means that I believe that God is fundamentally on the side of the oppressed, that part of our calling as Christians is to decrease, to resist oppression, and to stand with those who are oppressed, and to try to make the world better, like on that front, like less oppression, right? Actually, pretty regularly when we see Jesus entering into a situation throughout the Gospels, we see Jesus sort of evaluating and then taking the side of the oppressed and standing against whatever's going on. That is harmful. So again, I very much agree with you that, right, like being a Christian actually drives my resistance to oppression. And I certainly don't think that you have to be a Christian to be against oppression. There are a lot of like other motivations people have for like resist. Oppression is like generally what we call bad, right? Yeah. So anybody who has an ethic that like thinks badness should be resisted is going to be on that side. This is not to like, but certainly as a Christian, my faith pushes me towards that. I think maybe in specifically theological language, I would say that I'm committed to the proposition that every person is a reflection of or possesses the imago Dei, and possesses the image of God, which again can be taken to mean a lot of things, but among those things, I think it means that every person has infinite worth, and that no person can or should be treated as worth less or degraded on the basis of who they are.
Yeah.
Again, oppression. So again, this also leads me to resist oppression. So yeah, I don't think, I don't. For me, there is no tension between being a Christian and being a liberationist broadly, right? Like I also consider myself a queer liberationist, and I recognize that is its own tradition, and it has its own history, which is not particularly tied to Christianity. But my Christianity drives me to queer liberation, and my queer liberation drives me back to my Christianity, and I find comfort and I find solace and I find encouragement from God when I am tired and when I am burnt out on the work of queer liberation. I find that solace in my faith. So the two for me are very much coincide. I mean, and then at a personal level, right? Like I will frequently say, because it is true and quite relevant often, that, you know, Jesus, in the context of my personal prayer life, Jesus was the first person that affirmed me in my gender, right? Like, you have this moment and you're like, oh my God, I think I'm trans, right? Like, and, you know, and because I was raised a good Christian, I went and prayed about it. And like the first experience I had was of Jesus. You know, this is not God saying, well, this is a problem, we got to deal with it. It was Jesus saying, like, you know, I'm so glad you figured this out, my daughter. And like, you know, like, it was a very like,
I've read you write about it,
right.
and it's really beautiful.
Oh,
It's a really beautiful story. And I would highly recommend other people reading about it too, if they are so interested, because yeah, I think that's one of the things that people get confused about often, because sometimes people get confused about is the deep personal relationship, and how affirming it can be when you have your own spiritual relationship with a being outside of yourself that knows you better than you do,
Yeah.
that is bigger, is so much, so it is infinitely able to do anything and everything, including accept you for who you are.
Absolutely. Is eager to accept us for who we are, right?
I have done research into what psychologists have either looked into or tried to do to reduce transphobia, and it turns out, unsurprisingly, you know, water is wet. Men are more transphobic. We're all shocked, I'm sure. Men are more transphobic. So are people who are more traditional, more religious, and more, yeah. I think that's mostly, this is definitely what I remember. So obviously religion is playing a part here, but it does, but there are just to say that religious people are more transphobic is kind of a way to give people who are non-religious a free pass on their transphobia.
Oh, yeah.
Because
yeah, keep going. Yeah. No,
because it's not, when we look around the world, we can see that it turns out it's not just religious people, and that's not an excuse for religious people by any means, but it turns out, yeah, that people who are transphobic. Other things fall into place around that.
That's true. That is largely true. And so I agree, right? Like, so transphobia is out there, and oh my gosh, like the whole problem of like secular gender critical people and TERFs and all that, like that's a whole thing, and it's secular. Although even it is also true that a lot of that was funded by religious right groups. Right. Exactly.
That's the
like
whole thing
they work together, right?
About like being a part of a feminist movement and seeing those people do those things where it's just like, why are you, so you're not going to listen to me?
I know, right? Yeah.
You're going to listen to somebody from the Heritage Foundation?
But like the dude that literally doesn't think women should vote, you're taking his money to help fight trans women. Make it make sense.
Make it make sense, because because transphobia.
Transphobia. Because well, I think there's a lot of dynamics behind that one, right? Like there's the whole dynamic of like, you get the crabs in a bucket analogy used a lot, and I think that can be somewhat dehumanizing, right? But there is this dynamic that, well, I'm just gonna armchair feminist for a second, right? Like, so, right, patriarchy maintains power by pitting those that it oppresses against each other, right? And it does that by offering a scrap of power to those who are willing to oppress those within their own group further, right, on their behalf, because that allows the patriarchy a degree of legitimization in its own eyes, in the eyes of those who are contained within it, because they can be like, hey, look, it's not us. Like, these people that you are saying are marginalized also agree with us that those other people are bad and should be kept down or whatever, right? This is also the way fascism works, in that it's incentivized to, it always tries to work from the outside in. Those least near the center core of whatever they consider like the good national us are the ones that they want to push out, and they will make temporary alliances with anybody closer than that for the time being. And then once they've successfully pushed out that group, they're going to move to the next one in and push them out, and so on and so forth. So this is not like, this is how oppressive power maintains itself. So it's not like shocking. It is tragic, and this is why solidarity is important, right? Like, this is why solidarity is a thing. This is why solidarity is a word. I will say, on the Christian level, I was thinking about it while you're talking, and we started off saying, like, you don't have to be transphobic to be a Christian, right? Like, again, I am a Christian. I try very hard not to be transphobic. I mean, internalized transphobia is a thing, and I try to root it out when I find it in myself. But I try hard not to be transphobic. But the thing is, like, you also can use your Christianity to justify your transphobia. And Christianity, if I, like, again, take an armchair social scholar approach, right? Sociology approach, most established institutional religions have a conservative effect on cultural change, right? That is to say, and that's not always 100% the truth. So they, ironically, they usually start off as quite progressive, right? Like, you have the prophet, the religious founder, and again, this could be pick almost any major institutional religion, comes along and is like, hey, society needs to change. It's bad for these people in this way. God wants, or divine wants, or the world wants, or heaven wants. Again, pick your religion, but like, wants things to change and be better, and it's like legitimately better in a lot of ways. Like, their vision of better is actually better. But they also write it down, or it becomes, again, this institutional thing. And so, like, that step of better is where they tend to freeze things, right? And so after that, the religion, I play this out for 100, 1,000 years, and suddenly that same religion that was initially quite progressive and was a progressive force on society has now become a conservative pull on society. And so it's actually not, again, sociologically, it's not super surprising that being a Christian would correspond to being transphobic, because, again, not because of the tenets of Christianity. In fact, I would argue that it's quite unnatural to try to, like, to core to Christianity, to the teachings of Christ, to the movement and operations of the Holy Spirit. It's quite unnatural to those to be transphobic. But it is natural to the worldly institution that we call the religion, to the religious institution of the church, to resist social change. And since trans acceptance is a social change from what has come before, it's not surprising that the largest institutional religion in the United States, for instance, would be a force that functionally supports and propagates transphobia, even though, like, the core tenets of that religion don't require it.
Yeah, which kind of gets me naturally to the last point in this section, that so I am still obligated, because I haven't really changed any of my religious practice, to identify as an evangelical Christian. It's also the flavor of the moment in the way people talk about the conservative hegemonies, the need to stay the same, which is what, Billy, you were talking about and describing so well. Because when I was younger, it used to be biblical fundamentalists. Then it used to be, and I'm sure you could have your own, but, like, when people talk about these things, so now we talk about them in terms of evangelical. And to be fair, yeah, it used to be those biblical fundamentalists that we point to over there, but that has moved into the mainstream. And so it is more accurate at this point to just straight up say evangelicalism in the United States. So as people who understand how evangelicalism works, we know that in order to justify your theology, in order to justify your position, you have to point to some place in the Bible to say, this is where I found it. This is why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Where are we? So if we're following Jesus, it's not really him, which is why most people, when they're trying to use the Bible to oppress people, are not actually, they'll say that Jesus said something, but they aren't really saying, this is the line that Jesus said. You can't do that.
Right.
Because he didn't. So they use things outside of what he actually is depicted as saying, and to justify what they're doing. And even then, it's just not there.
It's not. No. No, I've been
Um,
writing about it for a while. There's not a good case to be made.
Yeah, which is so we can then maybe progress into the part of the conversation where we talk about, okay, let's grant the premise of the question. Why do Christian people purport to hate trans people?
Oh, you're still here. Well, thank you. Well, hopefully the next part's gonna come out soon, so like, comment, subscribe, be here. If you would like to ask me any questions that you would like me or somebody else to explain something, I have an email address, askkate2explain. Email me there. And until next time, I sure hope I've explained something. Without going out of my door, I can know all things of earth. Without looking out of my window, I can know the ways of heaven. The farther one travels, the less one knows. The less one really knows.